Hey guys, I want to welcome you to this quick update for the week. I call it my sort of Friday live, even though I haven't done one for quite a few weeks. And I'll get into exactly why that is the case in a second. Well, let me just bring up my notes and we can get into it. So, yeah, I think the last time I came on and did a weekly live on a Friday was probably could be 2 months ago. And so what's been happening actually is that I took a decision that I needed to focus on organic content. And so because what I was doing previously was paid ads and sort of, direct outreach to people, that kind of stuff. And what I figured out was that the reason why both my message was a little bit confused, and secondly, I was not sort of getting through to the right people was because I had not done the work on a kind of a baseline of content. And so a couple of months ago, I started looking into sort of different avenues for doing that and learning about it. And I decided that the LinkedIn kind of approach is definitely fantastic. I mean, I think there's no question that the right kind of people are right here. But what I do find is that it needs to be approached in a very specific way. And the plan that I have for that is actually to run a weekly webinar, something very educational where I can invite people in, and it needs to be kind of like promoted and then attract people into that weekly webinar, run the webinar, and then follow up with people afterwards. So it's kind of like a very specific campaign. But what I have found in the meantime is that the short form video platforms are really, really, exciting ways to get engagement and to be able to start to get your message out in a way that really helps. Because what happens as you start to do that sort of short form video content, and I'm talking about 30-second videos or 1.5 minute videos, what happens is that you end up sort of like taking off a chunk of what you do and then having to articulate that clearly and create a short video. And there are various sort of like, so if you have not done that yet, what's interesting is that there are a lot of editors now on Instagram and TikTok, for example, that there are editors that will allow you to edit your short form video really nicely. I mean, basically you can cut the video, you can reorder things, clips, you can add music, you can put titles, you can, make the whole thing pretty colorful. And so it's pretty immersive. I mean, it's not something you can learn in like 24 hours. It took me several weeks before I feel like I got a good understanding of how it works, at least. And it has taken me a while longer to get to the point where I really feel like I know what I'm doing with that kind of approach. So, but it's not that difficult, actually. You just need to know a few really key things, and then you're kind of off in the right direction. So in any case, a couple of months ago, I decided to take that decision and focus on short form video content. And it has been very good. There's no question about that. I'm now up and running basically with a very clear content plan that I put together for my program and for the framework that I've created. And in fact, this content plan literally goes out a whole 12 months. So there are very specific topics every single week. And, I'm kind of working on that. In fact, not only topics every week, literally every day. So each day there is a very specific slice of the whole thing. And it allows me to, focus on different aspects and angles, and also kind of fit into the customer journey, or rather kind of like paint the picture of the customer journey through the content. So look, this is really powerful. If you have not started your content, journey, your content marketing kind of like journey, I would thoroughly recommend it. I know that on LinkedIn, I see a lot of copy kind of people who have newsletters, those kinds of things. But when you go on these other platforms, you will see that there is a whole like movement of people into these short form video style things. And the reason why that is working so well, especially for Gen Z, because they come into things in a very new way, is because it is search based. And so what's happening there is that people are coming onto those platforms and they are searching for certain terms. And what comes up is maybe a short video which explains something in 30 seconds, and they've kind of got what they need. And they, at the same time, the person who's presenting is able to build a very strong connection with the person who's browsing. So lots of good stuff going on there. I totally recommend it. If you haven't started your journey down that, go ahead and do that for sure. Even if you don't have a product. So look, the thing is, this is very much about, it's two-sided really in many ways, like your product or the company you represent or whatever thing you have, but it's also about your personal brand. And so whatever you are doing in whatever capacity, you can start to build your personal brand. In fact, for business to business platforms, applications, which might be even, capital backed, it might be a whole team, having a personal brand in front of that. In other words, maybe whoever's captaining that ship, right? The person who's right at the front of the whole thing. I don't mean the head of marketing or the head of content. I mean the actual founder or the person who conceptualized the concept, or maybe someone there that needs to be the face of the whole company. And it's about that person's personal brand that becomes the most interesting thing, because people in today's market more and more are connecting with people, right? There's, if you see actual brand logos promoting something, or maybe a name of a concept or a name of a company, you tend to skip over it a lot faster than if there was an individual promoting something and you saw what they were promoting, in a repeated kind of manner. So anyway, that is what I have been doing for the last couple of months. As I say, super exciting for me. I'm going to start these sort of Friday weekly. For me, this is a bit of a catch up, actually. It's like a weekly chance to do a catch up. And I think what I'm finding is that I'm getting some really great feedback from some people in my connections here and community, that they kind of look forward to this video because it kind of reminds them of where they are in their business, and helps them see a different side of what is going on. So I just wanted to go into a few points that I wanted to kind of like mention today. And I want to keep this to about 15-20 minutes, so hopefully you can just push your paperwork to one side for a minute, and let's get into a few things here, because I'd love to share with you a little bit more about what's been happening. So I think there's a few points here. So number one, overall, my experience with this now is that I feel like I have broken through a little bit of a personal barrier in terms of customer acquisition, or at least brand awareness. So a lot of that I was doing through paid advertising on a very small scale, but at least that was the route I was going. And I was building sales processes that fit that cold traffic, paid advertising sort of approach to connect with people. But what I would say is that I really see and I really understand now that you can balance these things together very, very well. You need organic, you need paid. You also really need to have your owned community through your email. But that organic and paid goes very well together. Second thing, I think of what I found here, maybe an anecdote, is that it's really important to understand how to develop content. So I think one of the reasons why it's taken me a little bit of time there to get the hang of these short form content platforms is that there are certain ways to prepare your content, or to research your content, and to present your content in the end. And so we can call those content frameworks. And you really need these, because without those, you would just end up rambling a little bit like I am today. But that's a different thing, because this is more of a slightly longer form piece. But especially when you've got like 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, or could be even 2 or 3 minutes. But I'm personally very much focused on the sort of 1.5 minute limit right now for myself. You need a content framework, because you need to be able to present that in a very in a structured way in that sort of 90-second window, and so that the person doesn't get confused or lost. So that is something that you really need to start to look into. So one of the things that I have really kind of like honed in, maybe I think over these past few weeks, and I think it's been developing over time in terms of my framework and what I do, but my mission, I figured out, let's say, a tagline for my mission, which is to cut the failure rate for online service providers. And so the reason why this has come in this way is because I spent quite a bit of time developing a kind of like headline primary promise for my framework, and it was very much about increasing sales or increasing profitability, some other aspects. But when I started to think about the brand, strategy for what I'm doing, and that this is actually through some great people who I've been listening to around content frameworks, And in fact, I bought a small program from somebody who advises people on TikTok, especially, and did her whole sort of content planning process. And part of that is developing a brand strategy, and actually thinking of three primary topics that make up your brand. And so when I thought about that, I started to realize that actually increasing sales or increasing profitability or increasing some of these things are, yes, they are a result of the work together. So if I was to work with anybody, that's the result of the work. There's an output, there's an outcome from working together, and that might be doubling sales, as I say, or doubling profitability in my case. But there is a different angle on this when you start to think about your own mission. So in my case, my mission is not to go out and double everybody's sales. I mean, that is, like I said, that is an outcome, that is a result of the whole thing. But I really believe that my mission and the reason why I started this whole thing is because of the failure rate in the marketplace. And that comes directly from the experience that I had changing my whole life and career to go and start a service provider company, a SaaS platform company back in the early 2000s with my co-founder and other co-founders. And then looking at what does failure actually mean? Why wasn't that company a runaway success like it definitely should have been? And why is it that so many people today, are maybe, they are just as optimistic about what they're doing as we were back then, right? We were very optimistic, clearly. We would never have left our careers and left everything we were doing to go and start something if we were not so optimistic, so clear about where we were going with the whole thing and what was possible. We would not have done that if we weren't so, clear. And yet there can be an outcome which is not nearly where it could have been. So in our case, we sold out to GoDaddy. The company was bought for a multiple 8-figure sum. There was a result there in a way, but it's not like it was a complete catastrophe, like it basically fell apart after a year and everybody went home and, we ended up with having to pay loads of money on the lease or something like that. And, it wasn't that kind of thing where it just hit the wall. And actually many companies did hit the wall like that. There were so many companies that in those days that never made any revenue. They were just basing everything on eyeballs, right? That was the .com kind of like thing. We at least had revenue. In fact, it took us 3.5. I think I'm back up and running here. I think I had a glitch there with the internet. It does say I'm recording, so everything looks okay. Let's carry on. So yeah, so as I was saying, we essentially found ourselves in a situation where it should have gone a lot better. And so that's the situation that kind of like a lot of people are going to find themselves in. So I get a lot of people coming to me right now saying, hey, can you fund something? We're looking for investment, and I hate to break it to them that they are at a stage where they are basically 100% optimistic about what they're doing. And they're not telling me that they have some understanding of the risks involved, or that they have some maturity around the fact that it could just basically not work, or it could get 4 years or even 8 years down the line as we did. And basically they're looking at the whole thing from the perspective of, does my idea make sense? Will my idea work in the marketplace? Do I know my competition? And from my experience, that is only one dimension of the entire thing. There are many other dimensions to making the whole thing work. And so most people haven't even contemplated many of the most dangerous, most challenging things that are going to happen, that are likely to happen. Not only just like competition coming along, but really systemic problems, or founder disputes, or an economic crash, which means that funding dries up to the extent that it's just impossible to continue. Maybe all your customers go out of business, right? Some really systemic kind of problem, which just means the whole thing cannot continue. And most people haven't even addressed that or thought about that. People are very optimistic. People believe that that they will figure it out as they go, as they get down that path, or as they go along. Very few people really have the kind of perspective or the approach or the controls, the governance in place, where people look at the whole problem in the same way to be able to manage through those kinds of things. So So that's why I come back to my mission statement, which is about helping people avoid failure, right? And so a result of that is the work we do, which is about doubling sales and doubling profitability. But fundamentally, it's actually there's a lot more to it, because what we're talking about here is avoiding failure. And so, and the way we do that, actually, just to give a quick highlight reel on that, I suppose, is that there are a number of things that you need to be thinking about consistently. And it's the problem is that you don't do that. You don't do that consistent thinking about your whole business. You look at the things which you think are priority, like sales, or like, your marketing activities and leads and traffic and those kinds of things, but you don't look at all the other things. And it's only when you start to have a methodology that takes you through all those things in a consistent way do you have a chance of dealing with those things. And also, of course, being connected to the right people, so having that sort of insight into the kinds of problems that can occur. So there's a lot of stuff, that and I'll go into that at another time. So that's the fundamental thing. And now I want to say, kind of just cover a couple of points that I did mention in a couple of my videos earlier today, which was who is this that I'm really talking about. So look, we're really talking about sort of early stage companies and also businesses that are launching something into the marketplace. And I would categorize these as service providers. And I would think they're about tech startups, e-commerce startups, subscription services of any sort, marketplace startups, that means a platform with many buyers and sellers, hardware startups, and then kind of more traditional service-based startups like expert kind of programs or consulting type offers, agencies, intermediaries like in the financial services. So all of these, could be considered some sort of service provider. And now there's something that I think links all of these, which is that, well, there are a few things. Number one is the necessity to create a unique offer in the marketplace and to keep improving the product, or even to pivot into other products depending on the market, depending on how things go. Secondly, you'll need to support your customers, because service providers by definition are offering some sort of service, and actually they need to be able to go and support those customers. It's not that they are just selling a product and then moving on to the next customer to sell them a product and keep going. They need to provide that support. And thirdly, to think about innovative ways to finance the whole thing. So money is going to be required whatever happens. Even if you bootstrap, even if you think you don't need money, there's going to come a point where you do need to think about how you're going to fund the next stage of growth. And so that's very important. And in some cases, some people have illustrated that they can get away with purely organic growth. I think WhatsApp is a great example of that. They managed to do that. But these are very rare cases, and that is not something that you really want to plan for. And so the thing is that there are some things that a company like this, any kind of service provider, must avoid to survive. One of those is reinventing the wheel on learning, because if you're going to have to go and learn the entire thing yourselves by getting out there, you're going to have a long struggle ahead of you, because you're going to get a lot of conflicting information and it's going to be hard. Secondly, to end up hitting some sort of plateau, right? And actually this happens very often with tech startups. They get to around $500,000 a year, and they hit a plateau. And it kind of just like, in fact, Aaron Ross and I think Jason Lemkin wrote a book on, predictable growth, and they talk about plateaus a lot in that. And they talk about the fact, about getting off the plateau being very hard. And I think that is exactly right. Because once you hit a plateau, that is extremely hard to get the thing moving again. So you must basically avoid the plateau in the first place. You've got to avoid this ceiling of growth. It's almost like the death knell of the company when that happens. And the third thing you really want to avoid is going too slowly. And especially if you put a team together, the reason why going too slowly is not good is firstly, your team will basically just get tired of no growth. That's what everybody's working towards. And secondly, obviously other people will come along and they could bypass what you are doing. So those are some interesting things there, I think, about all of that. And I want to get into some detail here about what can go wrong. So I have 7 things listed, and I think some of these might resonate with you. Number one, I think that one of the main things that happens is that the assumptions that you made at the beginning and your priorities to do with that were not right. They were not based on true reality, and so if you're working on wrong assumptions and priorities, or no assumptions, or maybe not even having thought about certain things, you're likely to run into trouble, a lot of trouble. Secondly, if you don't come up with innovative funding ideas, or you don't have alternative paths to find funding at the right time, that can be a really major problem. And a lot of people will work on the basis that they're going to be able to solve that. And in good markets, when everything is rising and everything is buoyant and people are trading and there's all sorts of things happening, you could be forgiven to think that actually, well, you can just figure it out. But actually, the reality is that things can change dramatically. So that's the second thing. Third thing is that the offer is not differentiated enough or validated in the marketplace. So, having an offer in the marketplace and just saying that you've got something slightly better than the next guy may not be enough for the way the market moves. And in fact, we were always thinking about, well, we need to be thinking about what the market and business is going to look 10 years from now. And I don't see that very often with people. I think people are very much in the now. They're sort of like trying to fit into something that they can sell today. But where will we be, right? In 2033, how could you imagine things are working? And I don't see that on any pitch deck that I see is like a prediction of what the world will look like in 2033. And actually, whether you're right or not in terms of your prediction, or you've got a really clear perspective on that, you should at least have a stake in the ground. You should at least have a belief about what you think it will look like. Because it will take you 5 years to build the whole thing, and it'll take you another 5 years to sort of make it work, right? And by that time, you're 10 years down the line. So that was number 3. Number 4 is traffic and conversion. So just that process could be very weak or a bit like spaghetti, which is very often the case, even with people who have funding. In fact, funding can sometimes exacerbate that to the extent that people, can't keep it under control because they have too many ideas and they have too much money to be able to give to agencies and so on, and you suddenly end up with this spaghetti junction. Number 5 is no real systematic way to keep improving the whole business, and actually this comes back to the framework that I put together, which is very much about that. So you can get the basics right, you can get the offer clear, you can get your sales process clear, but it's that systematic way to keep improving, which is my USP in many ways. Number 6 is the design and creation of a product without a really clear plan for how to get it into the market. So this is often the case. So people can build products. In fact, they build too much product. I speak to software companies very often who tell me that they have built product for their clients, and now they've run out of funding, or the marketing campaign or strategy they chose is not working, and so all work has stopped on that particular product. So, and then lastly, number 7 is that people do overinvest in software or tools and underinvest in guidance, right? And they don't have enough guidance structure in place to keep them on the straight and narrow with enough experience level to avoid making really expensive mistakes. So those are some points there which I wanted to kind of touch on just to give you some ideas. I have probably, the first time you seeing what I do, this is the framework we have put together. It's comprehensive. It touches on every aspect of the business, or at least tries to, and it keeps improving. And the whole idea here is to establish a systematic process to build your service provider company. And if you want that, by the way, just comment framework, and I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to send you a document. I actually call this the innovation checklist. I've kind of got the framework there, but also a list of all of these topics with a description of what I'm really talking about there, what's important. And you can do a really quick kind of check to see if you have been thinking about those things. And, you could probably just give yourself a quick scoring about, where you think you are and the gaps. So, ask for that by all means. I'd love for you to take a look through, compare it with what you're doing, give me some feedback, because the whole point here is to end up with a kind of a watertight thing where we just know, we really understand the constraints of what needs to happen, and we have a very systematic plan to help people get there, to be able to get to the first $1 million annual recurring, ASAP. So one of my earlier clients, probably from a few years ago now, got to the first million annual recurring within 2 years, and that was when we were still developing the framework. So I want to say now that once we start to bring new clients through this process, that they should be able to go from zero, from literally from standing start, maybe just a concept, to $1 million annual recurring in under 1 year. I would say 9 months, possibly even less, right? Because it's very systematic. It's very clear about what you have to do. And I think what I've seen very much is that where people end up taking too long, what is really happening is that they are learning as they go. They're understanding how to do the next step. They get into that next step. And each time they do the next piece, they're kind of losing a few months. And so when you add that up, that's how things take 2-3 years or sometimes 4 years to get to the first million. Not to say it's a race, but actually I think it is. I think the faster you get there, the faster you've got a chance of survival, the faster you've got a chance of being able to then capitalize on that position to be able to launch the next thing or to be able to grow that business. So that is what I really believe. And the other thing that people have really found successful with this framework is to be able to raise capital. So I'm not a equity capital or capital raising guru, even though I have helped quite a few people now. What I have found is that actually people have looked at this framework and they have been able to answer investor questions far better than if they just went through a kind of like a funding accelerator program, right? Where they focus on, getting investor docs together and being able to present their ideas better. So that is one angle, that is one aspect of this. But I think a much more important aspect is having this full framework, this full picture, this full idea of how you're going to take your thing to market and be able to present that to investors, in your investor pitch. So it's like there's more content, there's more juice, there's more sort of like, background to the beliefs that you have about how it's going to work. So I think that is why this is a really good funding framework, even though that was not the original target. So that's it. Let's leave it there. I think I covered quite a bit today. Really want to appreciate you. I really appreciate you tuning in today. Hope this was a little bit helpful. I think from next week I want to do a little bit more focused things, and they're going to come from questions that people ask, on my short form videos, which you can and you can follow me, by the way, on TikTok or Instagram. Just look for my name, Azfar Haider, and on both platforms, TikTok and Instagram. And I'm currently locked out of my Facebook because it got hacked, and so I can't even get into Facebook right now, and I'm sort of like trying to get that back up and running, but hopefully that will be up and running soon. But obviously I'm on Facebook too, and so if you have any questions, just let me know. In the meantime, if you want this framework stuff, you want to take a look, by all means do. Just comment framework below. I'm going to get that to you, and would love to be in touch with you. Take care.